Well, where do you see, what is the specific of your respectively destination or country where you work in terms of cooperation? What is it that, for instance, India can offer a Swedish company or a European company coming to India? Let's start with you, Rajiv.
Yeah, sure. Well, India is a very interesting country with a large market and growing reasonably fast. The Indian companies tend to be very good when it comes to operations, when it comes to manufacturing and sales and marketing. But what they lack most is technology. They are very much behind on innovation. So I would say that the Indian market offers a tremendous opportunity to Swedish and European companies to come into India, preferably because of the complex business environment, work through local partners who are similar background, similar mindset, and capture the market potential which is available there. The scope for innovation is enormous. Tetra Pak is an example in point who have benefited tremendously from the growth in the liquid packaging market. And likewise, with the opening up of the retail sector, the food sector, there will be tremendous demand for high-value products, for innovative products, innovative packaging, and that is where actually the Swedish and European sides can complement the Indian companies. So really, there's a lot of room and space for volumes and for value-added packaging solutions.
Okay. And in reverse, then, how would the Indian companies look upon the European and the Swedish market? Are they prepared to work together and even export to these markets? Do they have products that are attractive to our market?
Yeah. Well, basically, because the home market is so large and growing so fast, the priority of the Indian companies typically is on the home market. But there are a few leading packaging companies in flexibles and in fiber-based packaging who are already exporting substantial quantities to Europe. And their basic challenge which they are facing is in finding the right sales partners. They're growing, but not as fast as they would like to, because clearly they have to be able to break in with the right kind of local partners. So to answer your question, there will be a select few of these companies who would find Europe as a very attractive market to invest in for both their exports and for perhaps contract manufacturing. Because India is very cost competitive. The manpower costs are extremely low compared to Europe and Sweden, and that provides them with a significant competitive advantage in terms of the cost competitiveness.
Thank you, Rajiv. Going to Brazil, we heard that the costs of living are rising quite rapidly in Brazil. Where do you see the advantages or the synergies between Europe and Sweden specifically and Brazil?
Okay, thank you. Brazil has a lot of similarities with India, actually. Going out to the companies, you hear very often that they would like to have more technology, to get more knowledge, especially from Sweden, which has a very good name in Brazil. So that is a connection that is very strong. As we heard from Anders, about 15, 17 million people have moved from the poor class to the middle class in Brazil during the last years. And for the first time, the middle class is bigger than any other classes together. This is really for the first time. And we are talking about 100 million people in the middle class. And the Brazilians are extreme purchasers. They want to consume. And so many more people moving into the middle class. This is a big, huge a big number of people who start to consume. And how can you define the middle class? Well, it is defined in figures, but without that, if you are in the middle class, you can buy a car and you can buy an apartment. So you have reached a level where you feel that you have money in the pocket. And that goes also, of course, to packaging. Their demands for packaging is increasing very much. If you go to luxury goods, like you can take shampoo, perfume, or whatever, the trend is bigger packaging, more exposure. And if you go to food and so on, it's environmentally friendly. And it's starting strongly now in Brazil, the environmental awarenesses. Maybe we are coming back to that, but that is a very, very strong trend that we see right now.
And they are very export-oriented. Brazil is very export-oriented, so I assume that they look upon Europe as an interesting market.
Yes and no, actually. They are very export-driven in terms of bulk products. I mean, iron, steel, aluminum, food, of course, agricultural products. When it comes to consumer products, it's a little bit like India also. 200 million or 193 or whatever million people live in Brazil. And that market is so big in itself. So they have had fairly little trade outside Brazil. But we see now also a trend in Brazil that consumer products are being exported, especially I would say to Europe, while the bulk goes to especially to China and Far East.
And regarding the retail side, as we heard of from India, there's a big change going on there with foreign investors coming in. Do you see any changes in the retail business?
Yes, it is, and Brazil is sort of a popular country right now. It seems that the whole world loves Brazil. I understand, of course, why, as I live there. But we see retail, we are seeing companies coming into Brazil more and more. I can tell you that, and it will soon be published, unless it's published today, that we have done, I'm also the chairman of the Swedish Chamber of Commerce in Brazil. And we have done a study together with the Swedish SCB, the statistics agency. And Sao Paulo, where I live, is the biggest, the number one industrial city, Swedish city in the world, including Sweden. So we have beaten now Gothenburg, which was before the number one. So now it's Sao Paulo, and number two is Gothenburg. And this shows how much comes into Brazil in terms of business.
But that means that the number of employed in
exactly, in number of employed in Swedish-related companies, or Swedish companies.
Fantastic.
Gothenburg is number one in turnover, but I didn't want to say that.
And going to Japan, Hans, it's quite another story. Japan has been sort of in recess for many years now, but Japan has also a very long history. So there's something specific. When we look upon Japan, what are the synergies as you see them for cooperating with Japan?
Well, first of all, I think that this image that Japan has been in a recess for a long time is not really true.
Okay.
But maybe it has not been in the same kind of growth that it used to be in the 70s and the 80s. Before I go into the details of your question there, I would like to maybe explain a little bit about the general scenario in Japan, because that is where the driving factors come from. I'm a little bit surprised when I go outside of Japan and read how Japan is being described in media and the press. Outside of Japan is more like the dying dinosaur, and everybody's finding all kinds of problems with this country. But that is not really the mood that you find inside of Japan. Of course, we have our fair share of problems, like the decreasing population, aging population, and to that, of course, we have now added some other challenges because of the triple catastrophe last year. And what we see today is that Japan even more have to go overseas. One is for business expansion, because the domestic market is not good enough or enough any longer. and the other one is for tech sourcing. And this goes for basically all industries. And when we look at the packaging industry, to go overseas to get market access, that process we haven't started yet. But what we definitely see is the tech sourcing, looking for good solutions. And this is particularly where I see a lot of opportunities for collaboration with Swedish companies, which we see in our everyday work actually in Japan.
China has been a very big market for Japan for many years. But that has now been a bit disturbed by the controversies over some small islands.
Right.
How does that influence the future aspects? Do you think this will be a minor problem that will be handled, or will it redirect the perspectives of Japan?
Well, I've been in Japan for 30 years, and this friction, or whatever word you want to use, between China and Japan regarding these islands has always been there. And it has been mostly the ultra-conservatives that have been driving around with their cars and loudspeakers and screaming a lot of things. But nowadays it's more the public opinion that is also getting very involved on both sides. And that has led to that Toyota, I just read the other day, they lost like some 50% of their sales in China, and the same for other car makers. And I think what I see now is that they are moving their focus to other parts of Asia. I think China will still be there as a very important place to sell. But if you look at the foreign direct investment from Japan, actually 2011, Japan was the second largest foreign direct investor in the world. And if things continue like they have this year, it's going to be even more. And the foreign direct investors from Japan today is going to Western Europe, to US, and other parts of Asia. And I think that is maybe a bit of answer to your questions also. Focus is shifting.
Yes, but what you mean is that although Japan being one of the most innovative countries, they are the world leading on IPR, for instance, they are looking abroad to overseas for technology.
Yes. I used to work in the packaging business also in Japan for a couple of years, and it was amazing to see all the packages that you could find in Japan. Exclusive, extremely expensive, and the reason why this could exist is that you have good margins and could afford that kind of packaging. But today the margins are being squeezed because of competition, other players coming in from the rest of the world. And Japan has to go globally. And then you cannot do that with these kind of packages. You have to have other solutions.
Do they have to re-engineer their industry as well to a more low cost?
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Going back to India, India has been, you said that the Indian industry is not so very high tech and advanced technology-wise. And they are interested in technology.
The packaging industry.
Packaging, yes. But at the same time, you say that you can say that India is known for its frugal innovation, where you do innovate with very limited resources. We have the Tata Nano, for instance. Make a car that is very cheap, and then you do it.
Yeah, it works in India, but I'm not very sure it will work globally. So I guess, necessity is the mother of invention, and with such limited resources, the Indians do tend to be very sort of imaginative, in terms of how much they can cut their costs to be able to provide a certain product or service. So, but it doesn't work like that in developed countries, in developed societies. That is really emerging out of the low purchasing power of the consumer.
Is that something we can learn from India, or is it something that we have to tell them don't do that?
Well, look, when you're really stretched and when you don't have very much, there's little else you can do. But when you are spoiled for all the abundance of resources you have, you do take things for granted. The luxury in which you live and operate, and the kind of stuff you have here, you you believe is something you have earned over a period of time, and you can go on with it. But I think as the world is globalizing, and as India is still far behind China in terms of the opening up and the reforms and the growth process, but sooner than later it will catch up. And the strengths that you will see in China and India is how they innovate exactly in this area of producing at the lowest possible costs.
So there's a lesson to learn.
Well, yes, but then this is really for such consumer segments who are not so quality conscious. Let's face it. I mean, this is for the bottom of the pyramid. But as you go higher up and you look at people like me who can afford quality stuff, I wouldn't buy that kind of product.
The car, you wouldn't have done
I
that.
wouldn't. Oh no. I would say it's not safe enough and it's not comfortable enough.
No.
So, but for my friend who is not so fortunate, for him it's a big deal because he's moving from a two-wheeler, from a scooter or a motorcycle to a four-wheeler car, and he feels good about it.
So in packaging, we could see the same. We see the same development.
We see the same development, and which is perhaps one of the reasons why if you look at the numbers, they don't look so large. $15 billion is no big deal for a country of 1.2 billion and a retail market which is the fourth largest in the world after the US, China, and Japan. It's a $500 billion retail market. But the packaging turnover just doesn't seem to justify it. The reason being that they are such low value packaging stuff, which perhaps you would find it very difficult to believe that this actually can be used for packaging. So I wouldn't suggest that innovation, no.
But it is an innovation if you can do it. But we will come back to the question of sustainability, and I think in that aspect, it's very interesting what is happening in India, for instance. Going to Brazil, there are two fantastic events coming up. The big World Championship in soccer, and in 2016, the Olympic Games. How does that influence the consumer market, first of all?
First of all, of course, the Brazilians are very proud of hosting these two very big events. And I'm quite sure that they will be very, very successful, both of them, in spite of everything we hear with delays, which I'm always hear. The Brazilian Soccer Association, they have been in touch, of course, with South Africa. And the Olympic organization has been in touch very much with London. And they want to introduce green tourism, or green tourists visiting these two big events. And they're working very hard on that. And the packaging will play a very, very big role in this. Brazil wants to show the world that they are environmentally conscious, not at least when it comes to packaging.
Mm.
So I think we will see a lot of that in this respect. And also, again, a little bit like India, not that Brazilians use so much cheap packaging. Brazilians, they are proud of being able to show imported goods, especially, well, any kind of imported goods. As soon as it's imported, it's much more costly, not necessarily because it is more costly, but because it's imported. And that goes for anything that is packed, and packaging also. And this trend we'll see continue very, very much in the future.
Mm. So there will be a consumer-driven trend set by the two big events.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Interesting. Now, Japan again. Japan being where they are, who would you say would be the most potential partner for a country like Japan to work with in order to take care of, to take the opportunities that we have today in the crisis, in the recession?
Well, if you look at the general trend in terms of finding new opportunities for sales, it's definitely going to Southeast Asia. So that's very hard to compete with that. But if you look at where the Japanese companies today go for their tech sourcing, sourcing, I'm happy to say that we have managed to put Sweden on the map.
And they go shopping, so to speak.
Well, shopping and looking for collaboration and so on. But I wouldn't like to use the word shopping. It's more collaboration. And just to give you two fantastic examples, just 1.5 weeks ago, we finished off the Tokyo Pack in 2012, and there we had the 15 representatives from Sweden in the pavilion, and we had a seminar and so on. And all in all, I think we had more than 30 matchmaking meetings during this exhibition, which is more than before. And then next week, as Anders also mentioned a bit, we have a delegation from Japan with 25 industry people coming to Sweden for Scanpack, of course, but also to see other things in Sweden. And we started the packaging project in Japan, was it 7 years ago?
Yes, 6
And if somebody would have told me at that time that we would have a delegation of 25 industry experts coming from Japan to Sweden, I wouldn't have believed it. Because at that time, basically the larger companies in China, they didn't want to talk to us. But today we see a clear interest for finding a good innovative solution.
So we're getting high ranks here.
We're getting high ranks.
We cannot avoid the interesting question of sustainability and green products and green packaging. You mentioned it shortly in your introduction. How would you say that Japan is working specifically on the sustainability issue regarding packaging?
Maybe you can answer
Maybe
this
you
better
can-
No,
than
you
me.
go ahead.
What I see is that if you go like 10 years back in time, people were talking about sort of environmental issues and so on, but it was more like cosmetics used in the marketing and so on. But today I think you can see that they are really taking this seriously. It's the 3 R's, of course, that we're talking about here. It's reduce, recycle, and reuse. I just saw a figure that 62% of the domestic garbage in Japan is actually from packaging and containers, and they have to do something about that.
And how is that?
It's being addressed, but I don't think anybody has sort of found the final solution yet.
Is it being burned, or is it going to landfill, or how is
It
that?
used to be a lot of landfill.
Mm.
And if you go to Tokyo Bay, when I came to Japan in 30 years ago and look at today, there are a lot of islands that didn't used to be there.
Okay. So have a drink and build an island.
Yeah.
Well, it's nothing to joke about, actually. Anders, did you have any comments?
Well, I mean, maybe what you could add is that it is very clear when talking to the Japanese key accounts that the green package is really top of the agenda, and that goes to sort of all aspects, of course, the choice of materials and converting efficiency, etc. So they take this very, very seriously.
Are they working with key figures and footprint?
Oh yes,
Do
absolutely,
they work in
absolutely.
that
Oh, absolutely.
communication as well?
Yes, no doubt about that. But if you were to translate it to perhaps opportunities for Sweden, I can see again that the sort of the fiber-based packaging should have, and different kinds of solutions of that one should have really good opportunities. I mean, molded pulp solutions are really very high up on the agenda. And there is a lot of sort of plastic one-way packaging to substitute. So there are clearly...
Okay, so fiber is still in.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's good to hear. Going to India, about the sustainability and green packaging, how is that? Is that an issue at all, or?
Well, not particularly, but there is a very clear trend towards sustainability, both by accident and by design. But by design so much as there has been now recent government legislation against the use of plastics, for instance, in the small sachets. You know, the Indian consumer is so poor that everything that you produce or that you consume, probably he consumes typically, say, 1/10 of it. So, you know, the packs are very, very small. The consumption levels are very, very small. So the sachets, the plastic sachets that were being used for chewing tobacco and a lot of these small SKUs has now been scrapped. So there's now been movement towards paper, for instance, from plastics to paper. Secondly, by accident so much as the fact that recycled packaging is basically cheaper. So there's a lot of recycled board being used, a lot of recycled paper being used. So if I was to actually see the overall consumption, there is probably almost 45 to 50% of fiber-based packaging, well, not fiber-based packaging, but cartons and corrugated boxes and stuff like that, which are all made out of recycled fiber, because they end up being cheaper. But the sustainability drive definitely is now coming up, thanks to the multinationals that are operating in India, and they're setting the new benchmarks for packaging. The Indian companies follow the MNCs. So of late, let's say in the last 5 years or so, there has been a lot of awakening now. And companies are sort of trying to advertise the fact that we believe in sustainable packaging and stuff like that. So it's becoming a sort of a marketing tool or a PR tool. And that is leading to a growing drive towards sustainability.
Okay. Will there be, since you have been very efficient, or India has been very efficient in materials use,
Yes.
will something get lost on the way there?
Well,
if we try to introduce our meaning of sustainability?
You see, that's a very good question.
That's why he's asking.
Almost 35% is lost from the farm to the table. 35% wastage compared to Australia 1%. And I think this also has a lot to do with the infrastructure, the absence of cold chains and so on and so forth. So what one is expecting going forward with this organized retail picking up and the Walmarts and the H&Ms and Tesco's and Metros of this world coming into India, because we are likely to see this now in the next 2-3 years, there will be a tremendous amount of investment on the supply chains. So that will also obviously have its implications for packaging solutions.
Yeah.
So there will be a change, which we will see in the next 5 to 10 years.
Meaning that the use of more use of packaging will save a lot of food.
And better quality.
Better quality packaging. Okay, very interesting. And Brazil being pioneers in renewable raw material, how do they work with sustainability and green packaging?
Yeah, I moved from Sweden to Brazil in 1997, and I see a tremendous change in the Brazilian society and the behavior towards more environmental awareness. It's really a dramatic change. It's both because people think it's right, but it's also driven very much from the authorities, from the legislature, as you touched in your introduction. If you go out to a sugarcane field where they are planting, you see always separation of waste. And there are two important laws that has been established very recently or came into effect. And that is that within 2 years from now, all communities in Brazil, and there are more than 5,000, they have to have a program how to treat or handle solid waste in the future. And 4 years from now, you cannot use landfills anymore. I don't know how they're going to fix this. Because it's enormous, because today more than 80% of the garbage goes into landfill. So this is an enormous pressure of recycling material. And they don't know how to handle it. They welcome, here I think Sweden and Swedish companies can play a very important role. Swedish companies are extremely welcome to Brazil to cooperate and to, I don't want to use the word teach, but to cooperate and introduce ways of handling waste in Brazil. It's an enormous opportunity and challenge on the other side for Brazil.
So, for closing this discussion, we are almost 3:30. I would ask each of you, what would the best thing that could happen in regards of the packaging and international cooperation from your points of view? Let me start with you, Anders. What would the best thing that could happen for Invest Sweden and your work in regards to packaging?
That's a multi-billion-dollar question, but
You're
one thing that I've seen as a major opportunity for both Swedish packaging industry and Asian and South American companies is that Sweden could very well serve as a good stepping stone for these companies, where we together could approach the European market. I mean, let's face it, the Swedish market is not big enough, so we're not going to see new entrants just looking at providing solutions for Sweden or Scandinavia. So if there was a sort of a partnership with an Asian company that could make use of the Swedish company as the platform and together approach the European market, that I think would be something that
win-win-win.
I think would be very much a win-win-win, and but it's hard actually to make these things happen. But that's I've sort of seen that as a good strategy, and look forward to one of the first reference cases in that.
Yeah. Okay. And Hans, in regard of Japan, what would be the packaging? What would be the best thing that could happen?
Well, the simple answer is more budget. We can do more, but
there's a lot of things.
More of the same in terms of the tech sourcing part. I think now we are working just with a few key accounts, but I think there is so much more to be done. Then I agree with Anders in terms of the business expansion part. If you compare Sweden and Japan, Sweden, as he says, is a small market, so Swedish companies have an enormous network out in the world for selling things. Japan has the financial power, but maybe not necessarily this expertise in selling many different places, and I think we could have a good combination there of the Japanese with their good products and the Swedish know-how in how to sell.
Is there a marriage there you would like to see in technology-wise or company-wise?
That's very much so. Unfortunately, we don't see much of that as of today, because the packaging industry in Japan is still extremely conservative, but I'm sure it's going to come.
Their daughters, maybe?
Or sons.
Or sons.
Yeah.
Okay, Brazil, what would be the best thing that could happen in respect of packaging?
I asked recently a previous finance minister of Brazil, what can Sweden learn from Brazil? And he immediately answered football. But on top of that, maybe not so much, he said. But I think that, and then of course, the best thing that could happen is, of course, that Sweden wins the soccer final in Rio 2014 against Brazil.
Yeah.
But more on the serious level, I think that this technical cooperation is really something that Swedish company can benefit a lot from. And also design, we have not mentioned that, is also an important thing in Brazil, where I think Swedish companies can also participate very, very much. But technology exchange in these areas we've been talking about, smart packaging, recycling, when we talk about that, is where we can do a lot, I think.
Do you have a dream marriage as a pimp? Do you see a...
Yes, but I will not disclose it.
Okay. But you have now, but you have one.
Oh, yeah.
Big companies that would, of course, come into Sweden also.
Nice to hear. We all have dreams. Rajiv, please. What would the best thing that could happen?
Well, the good news is that Europe is a very respected place in India, and Sweden in particular is a very strong brand. I mean, with the kind of stuff that Sweden has done in India through their products and services, there are about 35 companies operating in India. So they have won a lot of respect and admiration. Also, I mean, I've had the good fortune over the last 3 years of having taken the leading packaging companies to Sweden. And they have been absolutely floored by the stuff that they can actually learn and borrow, or maybe take back to India. Yeah, and just like what Brazil mentioned, I think the biggest opportunity is on technology cooperation. Licensing, technology transfer. Those are the areas where I think India is really hungry, you know. The Indian brand owner, the Indian converters. I mean, we see so much of the same stuff every day, you know. They are starving to see something different, something really innovative. Whether it be in terms of, you know, the intelligent packaging, the brand protection solutions, RFID, I mean, the whole works. So the marriage would be restricted. It wouldn't be the Indian way where it would probably last for many lifetimes. But yes, I mean, I think if there is absolute clarity about the fact that you may not, you know, the Indian company may not go to bed with you half the way, but he would, at least for the technology and the R&D that he can access from Sweden, he would most definitely be, you know, looking for a Swedish partner.
So thank you. And it means, from what I hear, is that we have to stay innovative in our part of the world in order to be attractive and in order to help or to be part of the future with all these interesting countries, big and small. So thank you very much. I would like you to give you a warm applause.
Thank you.
And you will also be honored with a piece of the rock, each of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.